it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yo, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Bump into your broadcast, grab a chair, fill your glass. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yo, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Bump into your broadcast, grab a chair, fill your glass.
Hey. It's the Really Charlie Podcast. I'm your host, Charlie Perry, and co-host Marvin Speller. We are here to, and I say co-host, he's the host, man. We got two hosts here today, two good hosts doing our thing. And this is a bi-weekly, show where we try to put mental health as a priority. And it's definitely something that I'm anticipating on doing for a very, very long time. I like this idea. I like everything that it brings attention to, and it's kind of real important to me, and I know it's important to Marvin Speller. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So, first of all, how's your day?
Man, I'm starting to feel better, and it's interesting. I remember the first time we were supposed to go live, you were talking about how you weren't feeling well. It spread everywhere, man.
Yeah.
And my wife and I were really starting to feel better. The last time I was on, I was starting to catch something, and it got me. And I never get sick, man. Never. Yeah. And so, luckily, our immune system is pretty good. But and we were able to take the things we need to take. And so we're feeling like big time better now, man.
Good.
But I gotta tell you, man, what hit us was hard.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was a knockout punch, my brother.
That's how I felt. It was just, the only way I could relieve the aches and pains was just going to sleep. And that was the best thing for me, because as soon as I was awake, it all started. The constant coughing, sore throat. It just was crazy, And then to top it off, at the end of it, the conclusion of all this aggravation, my back was killing me. My back was spazzing, and
Wow.
So. And the craziest thing, I put a brace on, and that was the worst thing. That was the worst thing. Just stiffened me right up, made it worse for me.
Yeah, and it's so many side effects, man. That's the thing about it. It's just so many things that you're like, man, you got the sweats, you got the fatigue, you got the appetite, you got the smell, you got the taste, you got every damn thing.
Mm-hmm.
I've never in my life had almost everything be affected in my body.
Yeah.
You're like, wow. But
yeah, it was I had pneumonia, and that was the worst I've ever felt. However, this last time was pretty close to it,
Yeah, I know that feeling. So luckily I had a good doctor and ready to roll, my man.
All right. I got some information from our friend Mike Samail about telehealth. And over this past 2 years, the society has had to use telehealth,
of course,
with their medical doctors and like facts that we'll touch up on later, but it's pretty much it's the go-to thing now, and where you're talking to your physician right over the phone, the computer, and wow, who would think that it would have got to that point, and you'd think something like that's real easy, just a conversation, but the bill is exactly the same.
Yeah,
The-
it's the same as yeah, it's the same exact bill, right?
yep,
Um, yeah, it's you know, when we were talking about this last 2 weeks ago, I walked away with very inspired with this thing of helping people and really all about really setting the tone for the future. Um, and it was kind of one of these things, Charlie, where it really got my brain firing up. Because we talked about there was so much to unpack here, and you think about, well, what's happening, right? Um, what's happening, and then where do we go from here, right?
correct.
We could have 10 sessions talking about the problem, right? And
Exactly.
and that's still some of that we still need to unpack, right? Like, because I think you have to talk a little bit about the problem every time we come on, because you got to get people to really like be engaged, where they're like, okay, well, this is what's happening, and just get people just to be able to talk about where they're at.
True. And it's believe it or not, some people may be dealing with something for the very very first time, and it could have been today,
Hmm.
you know, yesterday, but you always got to kind of rehash and retouch up on things, because you can't assume that everyone knows exactly what we're talking about, or um, and I just the one thing is that, with us bringing this to the forefront, through this podcast, did I don't know if you noticed it, but you see how many people in that are have this common interest for mental health
Yep.
and feel the same way that you and I do, as far as the priority, and perhaps we had mentioned quite a few times about the stigma in society about it, and it's it's the same conversation, throughout the past 2 weeks. It's a great job. You need to bring that stuff out. Um, I did reach out to someone and who was willing to come on the podcast. However, they are very, very sick, like we are. We have been, and
Okay.
so
Well,
um,
there's more and
this,
more people out there to grab, and over time, and um, I think one of the things that I kind of wanted to do today, um, I want to leave everybody with some coping skills.
yep,
But before then, I want to kind of talk a little bit about Charlie. We can kind of talk about, hmm, I guess the different kind of mental trauma that people are faced with right now. And I think sometimes people are not even realize. Um, and people are just such on edge right now, Charlie.
hmm
In between being sick, people on edge, right? Um, and before I get into that, I see Michael. Hello, Michael. Hope you're
yeah,
doing
Mike,
well.
how
Good to
you
see
doing,
you.
man?
Um, there was a buffet in outside of Philadelphia area. Did you see what happened with that?
No, I did it.
Okay, so this place ran out of steak, and it was like a riot broke out.
Wow.
So they ran out of steak, and everybody just started flipping tables, everything, right? Um, it's a microcosm of society, right?
hmm
People get frustrated, and their fuse is so short right now. I think when you start to look at society right now, this is where a lot of people are at, right? And that's usually prelude before really bad things happen. And it has a lot to do with not being able to cope. And everybody's on this wire trigger right now. And this wire trigger is causing other things. A lot of people are not even aware
hmm
because they don't either want to acknowledge or just be in that place where I'm not okay and I need help. That's a hard thing for people to say. I know it's hard for me to say, right?
Yeah.
I need help. I'm struggling. You think about all these instances of road rage. You think about how people are doing just crazy shit to each other, right? And you think about how much it's more now than ever. And this isn't even this isn't, you're talking about people now, they're back indoors, right? It's not the summertime anymore. People can go out, maybe start to do things for themselves, all right? But
Hmm.
you really start to see it's like we are setting ourselves up for the future from a certain way. Now, that's just the people who are able to articulate where they are by showing road rage or flipping tables or showing this outright rage. What about the people who are not doing that? What about the people who are staying silent? What about the children who are frustrated and really can't articulate where they're at right now? What about the people who are sitting home right now? They haven't had anybody visit them in so long because everybody's afraid of COVID and all that, right?
Yep.
It's kind of a cumulative effect of all these things you're starting to see in society, and it just raises its ugly head every now and then, right? And so that's kind of what I'm seeing more and more when I think about this whole thing of mental health.
It's the and a lot of times, well, right now it's hitting everybody in a lot of directions. Whether you're going outside being restricted,
Hmm.
or you're at home being restricted.
Yep.
So you're getting it from all kinds of angles. And then if in this particular case where students, go to school, now they get it from another direction. So every step of the way throughout just one day, 24 hours, you have to cope with things once, twice, three times, sometimes four times before you're within your first couple of hours of the day.
Hmm.
And so you're kind of in this little roller coaster, throughout the day. You cope with something at home, whatever you're doing, whatever you have to cope with at home. Now you're transitioning to go to work or school, and now you got to cope another time. You got to cope with another situation.
Right.
Um, or you leave work, go out in society, do some shopping, and you're coping with that. So it's one thing after another, and it's like four different scenarios that you're trying to cope with. And
Hmm.
finally, you're just like, everything's caving in on me. What do you do? How do you cope with it? What do you and and it all starts with finding some kind of solution like you're talking about, and where are those solutions? Um,
Yeah.
and what's your opinion? Where would you find those solutions when you're kind of going from one spectrum to the other, and trying to deal with things? Um, Individual people individually can't cope with some things. So
Yeah.
you're talking about tossing the tables and this and that. That might be something that just being upset. The first thing you want to do is toss some things, whether it's a table, or it might be a situation that it's you know, uh, well, they're doing it. I'm going to do it too. Let's act,
Yeah.
let's act rudely just like they are. Let's do this. Let's do this.
Yeah. It's a cumulative effect when you think about it, right?
Correct.
One person, this happens, and then other people say, "Oh, okay, this is how we're doing it," right?
Mhm.
You think about over the past year, murders have been on the rise, domestic violence has been on the rise, child abuse has been on the rise, right? People don't have these outlets anymore, right? People
Yes.
feeling like that they're sitting at home. They were sitting at home for so long, and then people just start to lose hope, man. And we all have seen it. Where we have people we know, and it's like, well, something's just not right. And
Hmm.
then you start to take your own inventory, right? And you're like, man, I'm not really feeling right.
Hmm.
Sometimes to observe it, you got to be it, right?
Yes.
And so this is what you're seeing. And that's on one level, Charlie. You're not even talking on the level people not even aware that they're just not doing well, right? They just think, hey, you know what, Charlie? This is the new normal now, right?
Yeah.
Walk around not feeling your best, right? Not being the best version of yourself, right? And then you start to attract others around you who are like that. But I want to talk a little bit about coping, right? Let's just talk about 7 like coping skills that people can learn. But then I also want to dive a little bit about just trying to be a better version of yourself, right? And these some of these things take time and nothing happens overnight. You didn't get to where you're at overnight. You're not gonna turn on a dime in the middle of the night either, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the number one thing coping is just give yourself a break, and that could be from the news or social media, right? Social media is just so much. If you were to take a poll and you were to scroll down, you see a lot of negativity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? A lot of times you just see you don't really see I did this or the negative post will get the most attention versus someone did something great and then all of a sudden you might see some crickets, right?
Yes.
And it's really because our attraction set point is has turned, right? If you were in a place where you were starting to see certain things, you would see that more often. But if you're in a certain place where you're seeing something all the time, you become wired to that. And when you become wired to that, that's what you see, and you start to see more of it, and you start to get attracted from it. So I would say as a recommendation, just give yourself a break sometimes from social media or the news that you're looking at. Because especially you and I talked about this last time. When you look at the news, it's not that positive. No one's talking about eating right,
Mm-hmm.
feeling better, doing things for yourself, right? Getting people together, just playing board games, spades or something like that, right? So I think just sometimes giving yourself a break from your routines that you do that you know is not feeding your soul in a positive manner, right? Second thing, your rest cycle. You got to get plenty of rest, right? And certain times a day you should rest, right? Try to get in bed before 10 o'clock at night, right? 10 to 6 is the healing time where your body goes through a healing part. Your physical part has a lot to do sometimes with how you feel. Um, diet. You know I was gonna bring that up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the stuff you eating better. Eating better sometimes. You know what? Remember back in the days, they say you are what you eat.
Yep.
You don't hear that anymore, and it's interesting about the news. All the stuff going down with COVID, and you got the Delta, and then you got the Omicron, and all that. It's still not talking about eating better, eating more nutritious food. They're not talking about certain things that can heal people. Get more vitamin D in yourself before you get sick, right? And that's the stuff that's curing people, right? The
Yes.
amount of vitamin D that you have in yourself before, but it's a whole another topic for another subject. Um, we talked about awareness, right? Hopefully, you have people around you that are aware. Say, "Hey, how you doing?" How often do people go around and ask people that? I saw a blurb maybe about a month ago. They were talking about paying it forward. And with paying it forward, people were doing it like at a Starbucks or something else, and
Mm-hmm.
just these random acts of kindness. But I think it goes back to it's hard to do that if you're not feeling your best, right? But it also makes it worse when you don't have people who can advocate for you. They can be like, "Hey, Charlie, how you doing today, man? How you been, brother? Tell me about it." I was talking to this brother last night, and every time I talk to this brother, he always asks me, man, how's the family doing? How's that? Those are things that really start to to me those are terms of endearment, right? And the
Yep.
more you can hear those from people, you really start to feel better, right? And those things that help you cope. It kind of like I read this book a while ago, and it was really talking about how full is your bucket, right? You can't do nothing from an empty bucket, right? You can't fill it up. You can't give to others when you're on empty, right? And
Yes.
when you have these things where these terms of endearment and you got people around you who are sometimes lifting you up, you can give that more to others. Um, we talked about raising your hand, Charlie, right? You got to have the awareness part and then raise your hand. Sometimes you got to take a responsibility and be like, you know what? Not doing that well, right?
Hmm.
I hope we can all do that. Easier said than done. And the reason why we keep saying is because we want people to potentially come on here. Hey, I need somebody to talk to.
Yep.
And you may need to hear that 100 times. I need somebody to talk to. I'm not feeling you. If you don't feel it in you right now to do that, that's okay. We've all been there. The hardest thing sometimes to do is raise your hand and ask for help. It is one of the hardest things because our mind is not wired that way. Our mind is wired for self-preservation, and a lot of things get skewed with that. And when you don't have that fully functioning, you can't raise your hand and ask for help. I got two more things
Yep.
for coping. Acts of kindness, right? Seeing it, doing it, seeing it, doing it, seeing it, doing it. And being aware from a standpoint is like, do you even know what it feels like in order for somebody to do something kind to you, right? Do you even know
Mm.
that?
Yeah. It's
And then your reset. If you are where you're at, sometimes it's hard to have a launch pad from where you're at. And so it's prudent to build that foundation now, right? Start to do things a little different. Could be one thing. Oh, here's that one thing we talked about. The self-love, Charlie.
correct.
Well, I think about, hey, what did I do today for self-love? What did I do today for self? I don't know, Charlie. Am I
Yeah.
aware of that? What did you do today for self-love, Charlie?
Let's see. Hmm. Well, mentally, I don't know if it's. Well, I did something from that you and I talked about, and your wife talked about, and was personally getting stuff done with the notary. So
Okay.
that's in full effect as of today. So
Mhm.
that was something. I don't. I think that's more like a personal goal. But as far
Personal
as
goal.
self love,
Yeah, what did you do for self-love? What did you do for yourself? Was like, oh, that's kind of cool.
hmm, I got to say nothing today.
And
Really.
that's okay. That's okay. It's sometimes, and that's where the foundation starts with, Charlie. That self inventory that you can take, right? That
Yep.
self inventory that you can start to be like, oh wow, and then you start to do it, right? And then it becomes a habit. This is what this is always about. This is what this whole thing's about, Charlie.
Hmm.
Every time we get together and talk, you know, as my coach hat goes on, it's all about building habits, man. I mean, for real. That's what it's about. You can't go from here to there without building a habit in between. Now, you have to sometime unpack the habits that you have. And this is a habit right here where you don't show self-love. We have all created habits of not giving ourselves self-love.
Yep.
That's a habit, right?
It's so true.
Now, to undo that, you have to do the opposite effect, right? So, and it even got me thinking, asking you the question, Charlie. Now, at least I can say you and I sparked some self-awareness here because
Hmm.
I can't think about what I did today for self-love for myself either. And you and I are on here talking about it. So
Yep.
imagine the person who's not talking about mental health. What are they doing, Charlie? And in terms of doing stuff for self-love. And these are the building blocks in order to grow from here to there.
I got it.
Okay.
The Mike Sumail says, as been stated, finding your way with self care does take time and effort. This may be the first occurrence someone must not acknowledge themselves.
Mm,
And I agree. Um, the Renee says 21 days created a habit. Mm.
I
So
like that statement. I also
yep,
think it's very, when you think about from your mindset of hearing 21 days, it's very ambiguous. And our minds sometimes run in the other direction because
yep,
21 days is a lot. Now, if knowing that being the truth, there's this point of that causes people not to get started because the first thing you hear that echoes in your subconscious is the 21 days, right? And
yeah,
that 21 days is like, oh my gosh, right? Because people automatically they just, we're all creatures of habits. We want progress like it's now. We
hmm
want progress yesterday, right? Like if I told you, Charlie, you know what, Charlie, I got to get 25 pounds, right? And I want it right now.
yep,
There's going to be a part of me that's going to kick in. It's going to be like, oh, man, shoot, that's a lot of work. And guess what happens when we start to think a lot of work? We just don't do it.
hmm
You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
So when you
20.
think about starting today, what can you do in terms of self-love and build upon it? Now, you can look up 21 days. It's a habit, but there's always that piece in between to unpack, right? Of the how, right? Because that's the thing. That's the thing that gets people, right? People are highly intelligent. They know better, right? Everybody,
hmm
how many people you know that in order to be healthy, they got to eat right? How many people do you know, Charlie?
A lot of people, almost
Damn near
everybody.
everybody, right? But
Yep.
how many people actually do it? You know why? Because it's that habit change piece. There is a there is a science behind the habit. What happens in our brain when we start to input that information, right?
And it goes back to what Mike said. It takes time and effort, and you're pretty much saying the same thing. You know.
Yeah, it's that whole thing because you know at some point because of the habits we go through, even if we know better, at some point we're gonna sabotage ourselves, right?
hmm
That's why every year, January comes and people start to do the what is it?
Resolutions.
All these resolutions, right? And then
hmm
by March they're all gone, right?
hmm
Because they haven't unpacked this whole thing of what true habit change looks like. And it seriously is a science behind it, man. Honestly, when I first started getting to the like this NLP, neuro linguistic programming, and you start to understand your brain and all this other stuff, it is very deep, man. And you wonder why you start to sabotage yourself, right?
True.
I remember all these years I had this yo-yo effect with diet, and every year I'm like everybody else. I'm grinding my stone, right? I'm getting ready for this New Year's resolution, and I'm like ready to go. I'm trying to be like everybody else. I got my journals, got everything, right? And the same thing happened year after year. Sabotage.
hmm The I mean, I already know quite a few things that were people's or individuals' resolutions,
hmm
and they're already set backwards. You know.
Yeah.
And hold on, I just want to check my battery so I don't get disconnected here.
Okay.
Um, yeah, let me get my charger um, because it's kind of low, so I don't want us to shut down. Um, the Why don't you go on, continue on, Marvin? I gotta head downstairs and grab it. Um, and
Okay. What do you want to continue to unpack right now?
I would like to um, you talked about the self love, but
Mhm.
I actually there's something I want to touch on, and that's basically um, I don't know if this is part of it, but getting the proper medical attention.
Okay.
And so sometimes we medical attention is something that's a little bit further than self-love, and you just can't get
Yes.
it. So, and I want to kind of talk about that a little bit. Um, but my charger, actually, you know what? I am good. I'm good.
You're good?
Yeah, I'm good. So, medical attention.
Okay.
And
That to me is I would say near and dear
hmm
because my wife and I, uh, we've had a lot of people who've been in this field. When you start talking about mental health, um, I want to be clear the things we talked about coping,
hmm
right? These things don't work if someone has a severe mental condition. And it has to be, these things could be supplemented with medication
hmm
and the experts. I do want to talk a little bit about the experts, Charlie. Um, as we talked about last time, um, there is a lacking in amount of enough people who can treat people
hmm
because we weren't prepared for a pandemic. How can you be, right? You hired before based on the need, right?
Correct.
We talked last time that the mental health has gone up 25 to 40% across America. No one was really prepared for that. So you're talking about an automatic deficit of thousands and thousands and thousands of medical care professionals, right? And then the ones that are there clearly burnt out, don't have the support and the resources, etc. There's so many great doctors, therapists out there, people who are really putting the fight in, and a lot of people have needed that support. Um, that's totally on one level, right? But
Yes.
then, do you know that 30 years ago they started closing down all these mental facilities, right? People can go get themselves together and out. Now these are emergency care facilities, as opposed to, okay, I need to be able to send somebody or someone goes for a short period of time. They're not there anymore, and um, I think that's part of the problem too, Charlie. Just not enough. I do see where they're trying to stem the tide. There are more and more therapists, people who are getting the education to go out there and help. There's also a flip side of this, Charlie, too. The people who are mental health care providers, right?
hmm
That's tough on the family, right? But it's also a lot of times the people you are caring for, the people who are caring for the people, they become just as ill as the people they're caring for, and that's physically and mentally.
I
So,
get what
oh,
the care they're given becomes overwhelming, um,
yes,
because they don't realize that their capacity is at its limit. It's overflowing, and and then that's when it starts to affect them, um, and where they gotta kind of backtrack, do some things, do some discussions, just about themselves before they start evaluating others. Um,
yeah,
they,
and you got to make sure you're to help people. Remember we talked about before about a bucket, right?
hmm
You're running on empty. You can't really help anybody else. That's just a
True.
fact.
Yep.
And it's that whole thing, right? Because in order for somebody who's going through certain things to get the right care, you got to have people that advocate for them. Now,
Yeah.
I'm gonna take it from a standpoint. Um, my mom was a nurse for many, many years, and she was an advocate for a lot of family members, right? And she knew it because she was in the industry, right?
Yep.
And she knew how to just ask the questions, right? So I would say if you have a family member who's going through things, especially with mental health, please set yourself up for a situation where you're asking the questions, because a lot of times industry where they're so short staffed, don't have enough help, they're treating people like they're hurting them in, hurting them out, hurting them in, hurting them out. And that's your family member. You're looking like, okay, I trust these individuals in order to get the right help. But a lot of times you can't get the right help unless you can ask the right question to professionals. And sometimes it's intimidating, right?
Yes.
I mean, it is intimidating sometimes to act a doctor because they're supposed to, quote unquote, have all these credentials, right? And there's a stigma. It's like, well, who are you to ask me? I'm the doctor, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I would always say challenge everybody, right? Because no one has all the answers. And if they did, you wouldn't be in the condition we wouldn't be in the condition we are from a mental health perspective in this country right now.
True. To comment, the remote options through BetterHelp did exhaust their resources with clinicians during the pandemic, and it's so true. And that's everywhere. That's at all levels. It's everything. I mean, it's there were some clinicians that were just not going home.
Yeah.
After 16 hours. Every day was 16 hours or more. And when does it, they must be getting exhausted and then
How can you
physically.
not be?
Yeah. So we are working 80 hours a week, and you have no choice, especially where you know governor of this state or many other states were saying it's a state of emergency. Um, and so what do? You say you can't leave. You have an obligation, especially in the medical field, to provide and render to the injured, and in this case, it's mentally injured. And but no, when they talk about you know professionals on the first hand, on a lower level that are going out and doing the best they can, um, I think society underestimates them, and they underestimate them because the first thing when you're getting care, you're saying you're not doing enough.
Mm-hmm.
You're
Yeah.
not doing enough, and it's like I can only do what I can, what what you're giving me, and um, it takes a little time, and you mentioned earlier, you can't turn things around and from one day to the next. It's just not going to happen. Everything needs progress. One of the comments was one day at a time,
Yeah.
but you got to take, you yourself, you mention all the time, baby steps, baby steps. How many times you tell me that? Baby steps, Charlie. And it actually, you know, baby steps for mental health um, is definitely something that individuals have to take. But then again, it always goes back. Maybe they don't know.
That's what I'm saying. Maybe they're not aware that, hey, I can't do a baby step. I need to be able to take a big chunk out of this elephant right now.
Hmm.
And so that's a part of it too, Charlie. People are like, hey. And sometimes you gotta give yourself a break sometimes. That's hard.
So true.
We're not easy and kind enough on ourselves at times. I'll be the first one to admit it. Hey, you know what our session is about too, Charlie? Hey, we have all the things we talk about, we see, the battles that we all go through. So I commend anybody who comes forward and is like, hey, this is what I'm going through. I'm like, hey, me too.
Hmm.
I'm no different from you.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
yeah, you think about it, man. It's like, wow, I'm feeling what you're feeling. Really? Oh, I'm glad we can talk about it today, right?
Hmm.
So Yeah, I mean, imagine that, right? But I think sometimes that work in progress of just being a little bit kinder to ourselves, right? Because we talk about the kindness, the first person we should think about is ourselves. If you're aware, and like I was saying before, there are two sides to this. There's the awareness side in order to help yourself, but the people who are really, really struggling, you can't just say to them, hey, you got to be a little bit easier on yourself.
Hmm.
These things don't register. You really need that intervention from the medical field or people who know how to move the needle with people, because that is the only way that's going to get them now. Now, once they get to that point of balance, then they can take things and start institute habits that'll become sustaining and long lasting.
Um, One of the comments is excellent point about caregivers reaching their limit, taking care of mental ill family members. There is a limit, and folks think they can just keep going. Thanks for sharing the information. The stigma really thinks, what is it, really limits who will help caregivers, and one wants to help the caretaker take some time off. That's true. The,
Yeah.
uh,
I want to answer that, Charlie, if you don't mind. Yeah, it's you know, when I've talked to doctors and therapists and all that along the way, a lot of them say that a lot of family members are not there to help. And you
hmm.
talk about a family member, right? It's
Yeah,
not easy, right? So I don't want to sit here and point fingers at people, but it takes a lot for people to want to help family members. But I don't know. It seemed like people were more readily able to do that back in the day.
yeah,
But now I guess people are empty, Charlie. And so they're like, I'm barely able to cope, right? I can't help nobody when I'm not in a place mentally, physically, emotionally to help others, right? And this is probably why it's so important to try to be there and do those things because man, people need help. People need support from each other.
yeah. And it's sometimes you may not want to help because you think your situation or individual situation, um, I may feel I can't help you. I got my own problems. I got this. And the person that's asking for the help may say that that's nothing compared to what I'm going through. So
Right.
when you have that conversation, you're like, so now you got to make a choice. You're trying to deal with your own situation. You have someone talking to you that wants you, the person that they believe is the source of getting over the hump,
Hmm.
um, can't help. And so now you have a dilemma, and who's going to resolve that? And what happens is nobody resolves it because they both walk away from each other, and so no
Yep.
one gets help. And or there's a few bad words, few bad exchanges, and now they're never going to go back to each other. You know, most likely they won't. Just because of this riff, and all it is two individuals asking for help. And so Michael says, I very much agree with Marvin on knowing how to reach out to someone. Um, reach out to someone is especially important and can be a critical step when addressing these issues. So true.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
the the one thing I noticed is, since we started this, is that um, everyone that's pretty much in the comment section is kind of, you know, professionals themselves,
Hmm.
and they're doing a lot of good things, and they're really feeling this, and it could actually be a forum when we kind of think about it. we can. This could definitely be a great forum.
Yeah.
And let me see. Renee says, I've given so much to others, and now I'm trying to find something left for myself.
Mm.
It's so true. And
So
she has.
true. So
She's
true, Renee.
been there doing a lot for many, many people. And I want to tell you, Renee, is that, that that's mental health. And if you feel that you have to discuss it and then talk about it,
Yeah.
please, please, ask for an invite. Put you on it and you explain the things. Open discussion and what you're going through. I know how many people you helped, and that started a long, long, long time ago. Decades. It's been decades since you've been doing the things you're doing. So,
Yeah. And thank you, Renee, for all you do. And um, every little bit counts for the whole world, right? Um, that's what there's so many people doing so many great things to help people, and I think these people need to be acknowledged now, not later. And I hope they feel the love.
let's see. Looking to see if there's anything new here. This is this is really good. Um, and I've been trying to follow after the podcast and see what comments are left behind or kind of posted later, after the podcast,
Right.
so I can continue to follow it up. And and I like to, everybody that's in the comment section, please. The only way we bring this attention further, we expand it is by sharing this podcast. Allow it to reach other people that Marvin and I don't know. Let it reach the people that the people that are within your, you know, y- in your little circle, your big circle, whatever it may be, and they may see this, and it strikes up a conversation amongst you guys that may lead to someone actually coming on here and talking to us about their mental health. And so please continue to share if you haven't already. Share this podcast so it gets a bigger audience, and it may be reaching out to someone that's very close to you and you don't realize it.
Yeah, it can literally save a life,
Hmm.
right? It could be somebody that's like, you know what? Maybe there's hope. It could be like one of these things where maybe someone does need someone to talk to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The let me see. Good evening, gentlemen. Good to see you. Hopefully, staying hydrated and spiritually replenished. Yes, I am. The it's a comment. Our youth are struggling, so if you reach out to a young person, please do so. It makes a difference, and yeah, I think that's part of my daily life. I'm always trying to reach out to someone, but I get what Renee's saying. Reach out to anyone. How many,
Anyone, right?
anyone. Just do it, man. Mental health is just it's it hits everybody, from a child to a parent to a brother to a sister to a grandma to a grandpa to the teacher down the street to the neighbor across the street. It reaches everybody. And so talk talk about mental health, make it a priority, um, and go from there. We look how many people, look how many deaths we've seen just this past, since our last podcast.
I know.
And
It,
that's
it,
just famous people. Never mind,
yeah.
the people that are right in our neighborhood. Um, Michael says, he posted the last podcast. My wife and I discussed the opportunities lost with some, excuse me, who were close to us, friends or family, where mental health was never discussed or dealt with in a timely fashion. And I had conversations with Mike, and he definitely had some opportunities to speak to someone, like you said, family or friends.
Yeah.
I have missed those numerous opportunities also, and over my lifetime, I've had some, careers where I had an opportunity to speak to many, many people in desperate straits, but I never reached some other people outside, the profession or outside my little circle. Um, and just because I didn't recognize it, I didn't see things, I didn't, and there's one, man, there's several people I would like to get on this podcast and just tell their story. Um,
Hmm.
we I mean, personally, Renee and I have talked about many things over the past years, and some of the things that she's been through. But what happens is she's got to be the strength, the head of household. She's got to be the supervisor with the answer. She's got to be the guardian angel with the biggest wings so she can fly longer distance. And sometimes those are the people that need to discuss things.
And sometimes these are the ones that need the most support,
Hmm. True, 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 true.
because that is a big giant gap. Big giant gap that's caused that's filling in this where more and more people are getting ill.
Hmm.
Those are the next level of people who are, because they just, it's filling in the gap. And it's the same thing with a therapist or coach, right? Who's the coach of the coach? Who's the therapist of the therapist,
I
right?
like that. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, that's always a fair question,
Hmm.
especially when you start to talk about people who, what, they work 16, 17, 18 hours a day. You're not operating on full deck,
No.
right? And then who you got to make it a priority sometimes when you know better too. When you are a professional, you have to make things like that a priority.
Mm, let's see. I we got Michael on the line, and when you and I talked, Michael's got a lot of intellect, and Michael, I want to let you know, just like we discussed that Marvin and I are definitely ready to have you on board. But what we're doing is we like you to come on during one of the podcasts. But we want to reach out to some uh, some people with some conversation and that are dealing with the mental health issues. Now, don't get us wrong. You may be dealing with something. Feel free to discuss it. And talk about it. Um, but let me see. Mm, I thought I was getting a message, Marvin. I'm sorry. The
That's okay.
we now this is the second show, um, and what are we doing? What are we doing with this? Is this going the way we want it to go, Marvin?
Yeah, and remember, you won't see the effect. It's kind of like one of these things where it's a crawl,
Hmm.
right? It's a crawl, because you're gonna have more people at some point. They're gonna come forward. Like I said, it may take 50 episodes for someone to say, okay, I've established enough trust with you all. Now it's time to raise my hand.
Hmm.
Or you could have somebody that could have be watching this show from a distance, and they decided that I'm not going to do anything to harm myself or others because of the things we talked about.
Yeah, true.
So it's always going to make a difference. It's always going to anytime you talk about something where you're trying to hold space for people to go from here to there, you can't help but have it benefit the masses.
Hmm.
So I would say a resounding 1000% yes, because we're also planting seeds out there, right?
Yep.
And
Just,
especially during the winter time, nothing really grows, right? So things
no.
take a while to grow when you plant seeds, right? And it could be something where somebody could be like 5 episodes in, and you said the one thing that gave somebody an aha moment. And with that aha moment, they really started to blossom from it.
Yeah.
So you got to look at it from a standpoint. It's momentum. It's a momentum thing, right? And we're doing enough where we're not trying to go too deep. We're just building with people. We're building relationships. We're building trust, and we're talking about things that are relevant to people in a way that's not way up here, right? It's
Hmm.
here. It's here. And when you right here with people, right? That makes it more real for people.
Yep. That face to face. That where and you're not appearing to be um the hierarchy of this conversation.
Yeah.
We want to have this conversation where I'm talking, you're listening, or vice versa. You're talking and I'm listening. Um, and how many times you see someone, that you're having a conversation about anything and they're turning away from you. It's a sign of disinterest. It's a sign of you said the wrong thing. It's definitely things you got to look at. And I just, what I love about this um, is the conversation. I miss having conversation with people, and this podcast helps me. This particular podcast has some sentimental meaning to me when it comes to mental health.
Yep.
Um,
Me too.
and I just uh, you can't force anybody to, can't force a can bring a horse to the water. You can't force them to drink.
Yep.
There's so many people out there that kind of cried on my shoulders or said a few things, and I wish they would come on here, but
And it may take a little bit longer, you know, and that's okay. And we're trying to provide that safe space for people, and it may take time.
mhm. So, all right. Well, we got 2 minutes before the hour.
Oh
Um,
wow, time is
yeah,
flown,
went by
man.
quick, huh?
Yeah.
And we, we were we were trying to rush to get on, and look how quick it came. It went. It just,
Oh,
I'm like, but I think there's nothing I can really close on other than what we said. Just don't want to repeat it over and over again. But I just want the listeners and the viewers to just, everything you heard from Marvin's voice, my voice, from your comments, take that in. Take that in and utilize it. We got 2 more. We got 2 weeks before we come back, and you may have some recommendations for us. And I would gladly listen. Marvin will gladly listen, and you may want to kind of have us maybe reach out to someone or let this be a conversation in the segment. Something that we talked about. I have some stats from Mike about telehealth, and I'm
hmm.
going to share that through a actually post on the Really Charlie podcast group on Facebook, only because it's interesting stats. And
Yeah,
excuse me,
yeah. I want
Mike.
to thank Renee Michael, the Facebook user who was there.
Yeah,
Thank you for all the things. My wife joined in.
Nice.
Thank you, honey, for joining in. And listen, I also
Hmm.
wanna
Thank you.
I wanna thank the people who listened and didn't say anything either. Right?
Hmm.
We
True.
appreciate the engagement. Right? We're all trying to learn, and guess what? We're gonna try to build this thing better to serve others because that's what it's always about.
That's it. Is another strong advocate of what we're talking about, and Alfredo Sonny Silva. Thanks, Charlie and Marvin. Continue to have these conversations. You're helping, and I love that. And
Thank you.
that's through the LinkedIn page, and that's another audience I'm trying to reach out to.
Hmm.
And thank God that we are putting it on different destinations because we we get new people like Mr. Silver on here, and I'm trying to do whatever I can to reach out to other people. And so, well, I gotta tell you, my friend, my family, that you're doing an outstanding job in many things that you're involved in.
Thank you,
Um,
brother.
and one of the things that I really want to give you an applause is just bringing this idea to us, to me, and doing it. And we're committed to it. And the only reason why we didn't do anything is because I was sick. But I appreciate you doing this, and I'm going to be committed to you, myself, and our audience to continue to do this on a biweekly basis. Now, at some point, you know, Marvin Speller may say, "Hey, we got to do this every Friday."
Maybe it may merge that way because there's
Yeah,
just that amount of people that demand us, and so we're always about trying to be servant leaders. And thank you, Charlie, for always being a servant leader. And man, you've been a leader, especially in your community, for over 30 some years, man. And thank you for just being who you are, my brother.
I appreciate it, and it means a lot coming from you. Um, Facebook user says, "Love you guys. Beyond the depths of my soul. We love you too.
Love you
Feel
too.
free, anybody that needs a private conversation. You need a private conversation with myself, or you may need to reach out to Coach. The email is easy. It's reallycharliepodcast@gmail.com. Reallycharliepodcast@gmail.com. And feel free. You wanna you know send me an email, and we'll go from there.
Yep,
But there's
we're here to
there's
help.
many ways to reaching us through the inbox. Some people don't want to put personal things in the inbox. I get it, but
Right?
you send me an email. Old fashioned email works wonders.
Yep. Works wonders, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, it may come down to somebody may not want feel comfortable, and then, hey, we need to do this private, guys. We'll make time for you.
Yep. And as everyone understand what StreamYard is doing for me and you. This this conversation right here, right now, is open to the public. But if you need to have that on two or one with Coach, just let me know. We can set up a stream. We can set up a meeting where, guess what? We are talking privately between you, Coach, myself, and you, and
Yep.
no one else is involved. We can do that.
Yep.
We have the capabilities of doing that. So that maybe you just may not want to talk to anybody else, and you just want to talk to us,
Right.
and we can do that.
Okay. All
And
right.
Danny Fernandes says, "Thank you guys.
All
I
right. Thank
appreciate
you.
Sharon Duat. Hello, how you doing?"
Right.
And the last comment is, "Great work. Advertising um, should be on the top of the capital letters. That these are the mental health, and it is so needed, so useful, and I don't see anyone else doing it, and it's needed." I agree.
Right. Okay. All right. Okay.
All right, sir. We
All right.
will got to
Okay.
set up another date, so you just let me know, and then
I
we'll
will, sir.
advertise it as always. And Give the missus a hug from me.
I will. All right, my brother. All right.
All right, take care.
All right, take care.
God
Bye.
bless. Great show as always. I appreciate my host, Marvin. He does many things. It's one thing that dude is we talk about things where people do, caretakers do, and they're over, they're doing many things, and he's never getting exhausted. He continues to do the things he does, from the streets in California to within his home, within his community. And I am so glad he married into my family. That's why I call him family. All right, everyone. That email again is reallycharliepodcast@gmail.com. You want to reach out to me, just send me an email, and I read them every day, probably 3-4 times a day. So please, if you have something you want to talk about, let us know. All right. And I'm going to end you with my introduction. Definitely great. It was done by Lionel Peter Walker, and I love it. Get 5 stars for this, Lionel. Take care, brother. Take care, everyone. Continue to listen to the Really Charlie podcast. We got several shows next week, so follow me on the Facebook page. Take care. Good night.
It's the Really Charlie podcast. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie podcast. Yo, it's the Really Charlie podcast. Bump into your broadcast, grab a chair, fill your glass. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie podcast. Yo, it's the Really Charlie podcast. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie podcast. Bump into your broadcast, grab a chair, fill your glass.